Joining us now here in the studio is Luciano Zaccara, who's an associate professor of Gulf politics at Qatar University, and also with us Mohamad Elmasry, a professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies, to discuss this deal, this ceasefire agreement, and whether or not it could lead to lasting peace in Gaza and for Palestinians. Mohamad, your thoughts first about this agreement. How do you view this? Is this just a temporary deal, or something that could lead to more sustainable peace?
Well, first of all, I think it's really interesting that this is basically the same agreement with some minor changes that Biden proposed all the way back in May of 2024. The reason why it's getting pushed across the finish line now, I believe, is because of Donald Trump and the pressure that he's been able to exert on the Israeli side. And if there's time, we can kind of unpack some of the things that Trump has done and said to exert pressure. But right now, it's very precarious, as Tariq Abu Azum was just saying, because no one knows to what extent the U.S. is going to be able to sort of hold Israel's feet to the fire, or to what extent it's going to be willing to do that. Israel has a history of violating ceasefires. There are still some gray areas. There are areas where, if you look at the deal, they're going to talk about and negotiate some details later on. So there is a way out for Israel if it wants to sabotage this, and it's been talking for 15 months about total victory, about depopulating the Gaza Strip, eliminating Hamas, and so on and so forth. So, you know, it remains to be seen.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those grey areas that you mentioned in a moment. But Luciano, your thoughts first about the deal. Can this ceasefire agreement, when it comes into effect, can it hold and lead to lasting peace, you think?
Well, so far, I believe it's too early to decide that, but I think it's still very fragile. As he said, there are many gray areas that we don't know how it's going to be implemented, who's going to monitor that both are complying what it was signed. And still we have to remember that there is one power that is more powerful than the other, that everything that happened inside the Gaza Strip should be authorized by Israel. So talking about the future reconstruction or the humanitarian aid, still Israel is going to approve or not whatever happens in Gaza. So if this is still there and Israel has been using that as a leverage in order to pressure Hamas, how is it possible to continue to think about moving to the second or the third phase?
Second or third phase. Monitoring the agreement, Mohamad, is going to be a difficulty, isn't it? I mean, for example, it calls for a return of people who fled to the south to return to their homes in northern Gaza. Now, the Qataris and the Egyptians are supposed to be implementing this, are supposed to be the guarantors of this, right? How can they ensure that aspect of the agreement, for example, that people in southern Gaza can return to the north? How are the guarantors going to guarantee the return of displaced Palestinians, for example?
Right. So, I mean, and with all due respect to the Egyptians and the Qataris, really, I think the most important guarantor here is the United States, because this, at the end of the day, and I don't want to oversimplify things, but it comes down to whether or not Israel is going to allow these things to take place on the ground. As I mentioned in my earlier comment, to what extent is the United States actually going to hold Israel to account? Right. Is Donald Trump really interested in putting this pressure on Israel because he might see this as a kind of political victory? Will he see it as
does Trump claim victory for reaching this agreement, or is it Biden who hinted when he was speaking last night that this deal was his framework? Who takes credit for this, you think?
Well, they're both taking credit, but to be quite honest with you, I think Biden's claims are absurd. Everything has remained the same for 15 months. The only new variable that has entered the equation is Donald Trump and the pressure that he applied in recent days and in recent weeks on Benjamin Netanyahu. So I think it's preposterous, quite frankly, to give credit to Biden and Blinken when they had 15 months to do this and failed to do it.
Mohamad, I mean, Luciano, Mohamad talks about the pressure there that Trump is reported to have applied on Netanyahu to accept this deal, because as Biden himself admitted yesterday, this deal is similar to the one we saw a few months ago, right? What pressure could that be? There have been some suggestions that there could have been a deal, some sort of deal done behind the scenes between Trump and Netanyahu. What could that be, you think?
Exactly. Well, this is what everybody's thinking about. Pressure in order to push Israel to do something Trump, we think, is not going to do. But we may have done is that he agreed something that in exchange of accepting some condition in order to reach this deal, Trump will be blind towards some things that happen inside the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank, for instance, the expansion of irregular or illegal settlements, maybe the possible of future annexation of part of West Bank, things that Netanyahu would be happy to accept, also because he needs to convince the far-right members of his cabinet, because they keep saying that they don't want to sign it, will never sign any ceasefire with Hamas. So if now the cabinet today approved that, means that they were convinced about something else that would happen during Trump administration.
What do you think Mohamad could have convinced Netanyahu here, and at what cost could this come for Palestinians?
Well, we have to remember several months back when Trump was just a candidate, he said this war needs to be wrapped up quickly. He said Israel looks bad. They're losing the public relations war. He condemned their bombings on civilian infrastructure. And then he said, he promised basically that this war would end as soon as by the time he took office. And then in recent days, he sent Steve Witkoff, his envoy, to the region. And I thought it was really interesting, the reporting on this in Israeli media, that Witkoff called the Prime Minister's office, Benjamin Netanyahu's office, on Friday from Doha. And he said, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow on Saturday to discuss this ceasefire. And the Prime Minister's office said, well, no, it's the Sabbath. We don't work on the Sabbath. And Witkoff said, you're going to work on this Sabbath. And so that's an example of the seriousness with which the Trump incoming administration was taking this.
He'd also threatened Trump that all hell, in his own words, would break out in the Middle East if the captives weren't released. You know, obviously it's very difficult to know what he was thinking here, but what do you think it suggests about the way in which this incoming U.S. administration is going to deal with this issue?
Well, considering what happened before, I mean, we know that Trump doesn't want to start any war, to engage in any war with any new actor in the region, mainly Iran, but he doesn't want to deal with messes that there were before. So he wants to start with a clean sheet in this tenure, with this conflict at least settle, at least in terms of the agreement. Whether he will be pushing Israel or monitoring what is going on seriously, we believe that is going to happen, but not in the way that maybe Biden could have done it before. And he will be monitoring what other actors are going to do, how Iran is going to react or not to this deal.
Right. Mohamad, let's talk about what comes next then. The deal is, comes into effect on Sunday. Let's hope that the first phase is successful and, it's implemented. What is the next step, the second stage, obviously, of the deal? But what happens for Palestinians? Not just those in Gaza, but those in the West Bank as well. How do you see the future looking for them?
Well, it all depends on, really the ball in many ways is in Israel's court. I mean, we know that Hamas wants to follow through with this. They've had a deal on the table since October of 2023, right, for 15 months, basically since the start of the war. So is Israel sincere in wanting to push this through? Is the Trump administration going to hold Israel's feet to the fire? The Palestinians are for good reason, very nervous. The Israelis have a history of violating ceasefire agreements with the Lebanese, with the Palestinians, and with other groups. One of the things that Norman Finkelstein does is in his book on Gaza, An Inquest to Its Martyrdom, he lays out some of those times when Israel violated ceasefire agreements. And so that's what Palestinians are nervous about right now.
Briefly, Luciano, what do you think comes next year?
Well, we have to remember that Biden said yesterday that it might not reach the second phase, even though negotiations can continue and the first phase can be expanded. But if there is no success in the first phase, they will never reach the second phase. So we still need to wait this first 6 weeks and how day by day we will see the exchange of prisoners.
So cautious optimism. Thank you very much. Thank you both for joining us here on the News Hour. Luciano Zaccara from Qatar University and Mohamad Elmasry from the Doha Institute of Graduate Studies. Thank you both. Well, as we